Targaryens die tragically all the time, but the terrifying death of Aerea Targaryen after her year-long disappearance with Balerion the Black Dread might be the most mysterious of all. What happened after 13-year-old Aerea claimed Balerion the Black Dread, the oldest and largest dragon in the known world at the time, only to disappear for a year and then reappear, not only dying herself, but showing Balerion as having been severely injured by something. But before we get into Aerea's death and disappearance and Balerion's injury, let's take a step back and take a look at Aerea and understand who she was and where she came from and how she got there. Princess Aerea Targaryen was the one-time heir to the Iron Throne, the daughter of Aegon the Uncrowned and Queen Rhaena Targaryen. To understand where she falls, in the family tree, you had Aegon the Conqueror, his son was Aenys, Aenys' son was Aegon the Uncrowned. Now, the reason Aerea's father is called Aegon the Uncrowned is because he was usurped after Aenys' death by Aenys' brother, Maegor. So Maegor took the throne because he considered Aegon the Uncrowned too young and immature and not as strong. He thought he was weak like Aenys, and so Maegor took over and then would eventually kill Aegon the Uncrowned in a fight with their dragons. Of course, this would be after Rhaena Targaryen, Aegon the Uncrowned's sister and wife, got pregnant with twins. So Rhaena Targaryen had two twin daughters. They were Aerea and Rhaella. Or is this Rhaella and that's Aerea? Fun fact, not knowing the difference is actually a plot point, but we'll get there in a minute. But after the death of Aegon the Uncrowned, Maegor would force Rhaena Targaryen to go to King's Landing and marry him as one of his 6 brides. Because yes, Maegor is basically Henry VIII. Now, for Rhaena, marrying your uncle who'd murdered your husband was less than ideal, but at that point they had gotten her 2 daughters, so they just dealt with it and she married him. And then after marrying him, the twins were split up. And this is significant to remember because from a young age, the twins were, identical and looked alike in every sense, but personality-wise, they were completely different. Aerea was very quiet, subdued, and shy, and Rhaella was the complete opposite. She was loud and abrasive and kind of like a terror to everyone around her. And so when the twins were split, Aerea was kept in King's Landing because she was the slightly older of the 2 twins, and she was made Maegor's heir, because Maegor was struggling to, have a child, which is why he kept marrying all these wives. And so because this was the only, Targaryen child that wasn't, actively trying to fight against him like Jaehaerys was, Jaehaerys being Rhaena's younger brother, Maegor named Aerea his heir and disinherited Jaehaerys. And since he had, an heir at King's Landing, the loud and abrasive twin, Rhaella, was sent down to Old Town to train to become a septa, which is, kind of like a nun. Now, eventually, Maegor would be kind of overthrown / killed mysteriously, or maybe not killed. He died on his own. We don't know. But as that was happening, Rhaena fled King's Landing with Aerea to her brother Jaehaerys, who had, staked his claim for the throne. And then once Maegor was dead, Jaehaerys ascended to the throne, and all was good. But after the crowning of Jaehaerys, something mysterious happened with the twins. Jaehaerys was crowned in Old Town, where Rhaella, had been sent to train as a septa. So Rhaena, Rhaella, and Aerea had been reunited for the first time there during Jaehaerys' coronation. And then after his coronation, they all departed for King's Landing, with one of the twins staying behind to continue being trained as a septa, except the twins suddenly weren't behaving the same. Aerea, the heir, who had previously been, this very quiet and introverted child, was suddenly loud and abrasive and wild. And Rhaella, the one who had formerly been like that and had been sent to train as a septa, was now a lot more subdued, a lot more quiet, and very, happy in this quiet septa training lifestyle. Now, while no one ever confirms this, it is very heavily speculated that the twins were switched. But why, we don't know entirely. Regardless, though, from that day forward, Aerea became kind of a problem child. She remained the heir to the throne because at that point, Jaehaerys was still very young, had not had any children of his own, and so the line of succession needed to be protected, and she was the only option. But that would become a problem because, in a court, there's lots of scheming, people trying to subvert each other, and at one point, she was the subject of a kidnapping plot, though she was able to be smuggled away to safety. In the aftermath of that whole situation, though, her mother, Rhaena, had enough and was like, I'm taking her to Dragonstone with me, I'm done. She's not staying in King's Landing any longer. But the problem is Aerea loved King's Landing. She loved the big boisterous atmosphere of the court, which is something that is very lacking on Dragonstone, which is, the lonely island in the middle of the Blackwater. And this led to a ton of tension with her mother. Rhaena and Aerea would fight all the time. Aerea would constantly be wanting to leave. She'd be asking her mother's friend, Alyssa Farman, to take her with her. And then when Alyssa did leave and didn't, Aerea was very sad. Eventually, Queen Alysanne, Jaehaerys' wife, and her mother, Rhaena's sister, so her aunt, would come to visit Dragonstone, and she would beg her to, like, please take me back to King's Landing. I miss it there. I don't like being here, yada, yada, yada. Alysanne would try to speak to her sister Rhaena about, like, bringing Aerea back, and Rhaena was having none of it. Rhaena, by this point, I think, is just fully traumatized of her own accord. She's had everyone that she cares about, like, taken from her. Her relationships that, like, still exist are shitty, and it's all a mess. So no, she didn't want to let her daughter go. That led to another big fight with Aerea and Rhaena, and the shit hit the fan. Shortly after that, Aerea, who is close to 13 at this point, decides it's time for her to go claim a dragon, but instead of claiming one of the younger dragons that are around, she decides to go for the biggin. She wants her dragon to be Balerion the Black Dread. So she claims him, mounts him, they go to fly, and they disappear from Dragonstone. Rhaena, her mother, has no idea where she went and immediately takes her dragon, Dreamfire, and flies to King's Landing to, find Aerea, because that's where she assumes that she is. Because Aerea had been missing home. She wanted to go home, which for her was King's Landing. But when Rhaena got there was no Aerea. Aerea and Balerion had not been seen, so Rhaena proceeded to travel to Old Town, seeing maybe if she had gone to see her twin. No Aerea. She starts flying from castle to castle in all the provinces, all the kingdoms around Westeros, trying to see if Aerea has been spotted, anything, and there is nothing. Jaehaerys has a bunch of ravens sent out saying, if anyone spots her, please let us know. And they start having their kind of spy network and informers from all over the place start looking for her to see if they can find her. But whether it was Westeros or the free cities in Essos and lots of, Western Essos, there's nothing. There is no hint of her. We don't know where she went. Rhaena spends the entire next year just flying from place to place in the wilderness by herself. Whether it's looking for her or just wanting to be in solitude is unclear, but that's where she, remains until Aerea mysteriously reappears. Rhaena would never get to see her, though, because at that point she was Estermont, and poor Aerea did not last the day. Because when Aerea showed back up at the capital, she slid off Balerion's back and was immediately, seen to be in a horrific state of dying. Her clothes were basically rotten to rags, her hair was matted, and then her skin was basically burning up. And when I say burning so hot that when the knight that was carrying her inside, was carrying her, he could feel the heat coming off of her through his armor. She was malnourished, half-starved, her skin was saggy. It's a very gross and scary image. So she was looked after by the Grand Maester and Septon Barth. Septon Barth is kind of a amateur dragon expert at the capital, or at least he would become the amateur dragon expert. Anyway. But they tried to take care of her as best they could, but refused to let the king and queen in to see her because of the state she was in. When they announced her death, they said it was just a fever, but if we look at Septon Barth's writings, that is not the case. Next part will contain some graphic descriptions of what happened to her. Please skip now if you're squeamish, okay? Aerea was described as literally cooking from the inside out. There was this source of heat inside her, and they didn't know what it was, and it was causing her literally to cook. Her skin was cracking, and Septon Barth is repulsed having to describe it as looking like pork crackling. Her eyes are exploding out of her head. Nothing that they do to try to give her some relief milk of the poppy is helping, and then worst of all, they can see things moving under her skin. Finally, in an act of desperation, they put her basically in an ice bath, and it is there that her heart literally stops because of the shock. But then, because of the ice bath, whatever was in her comes out. Septon Barth describes them as these weird worms with faces, snakes with hands, some were as big as a finger, some as big as his arm, and these had all been inside of her and are some form of fire magic creature, which is why she was literally burning. They might be some form of mutated fireworm, which is something that was known to be in Valyria, and so the combination of that with the fact that they couldn't find her in any of the known places leads Septon Barth to believe that Balerion had flown her back to Valyria for some reason. Possibly because Aerea, in her new bond with him, had wanted to go home, and his original home being Valyria. Though, of course, that is speculation. But if they did go to Valyria, Aerea didn't just contract these fireworms. Balerion shows up with these 9-foot-long gashes on his side and half-healed scars all along him. Which leads us to ask, what the hell could attack and injure the most powerful and dangerous creature in the entire world? whatever is left in Valyria, I suppose. While this is speculation, I think it's still safe to say that the Doom of Valyria took one more person that day and injured another. Okay, goodbye.